Hello, everyone. My name is Lucy Chioma, and this presentation shares my final reflection and feedback on LDT 548, Design of Accessible and Inclusive Digital Learning. This course has been one of the most practical courses I have taken in the Learning Design and Technologies program because it challenged me to think differently about accessibility, inclusion, and learners' experience. In this presentation, I will share what worked well, my key learnings, and some suggestions for future versions of this course. Overall, I had a very positive experience in this course. One thing I appreciated was that accessibility was not taught as a theoretical concept. Instead, we were given opportunities to experience accessibility challenges, build accessible learning materials, evaluate our work, and receive feedback from peers. The combination of empathy challenges, website development, accessibility audit, and discussions helped me connect accessibility principles to real instructional design practice. Throughout the course, I found myself thinking less about compliance and more about the actual experience learners have when interacting with digital learning environment. The strongest part of this course for me was the empathy challenges, the dyslexia, color blindness, hearing loss, and the mouth tick activities allowed me to experience barriers that many learners face every day. These activities helped me understand accessibility at a much deeper level than readings alone could have. I also appreciated the website project because he allowed us to explore what we were learning immediately instead of only discussing accessibility. We had to design, test, revise, and improve our own learning experience. The peer review process was also valuable because he exposed usability and accessibility issues that I would not have identified on my own. Receiving feedback from different perspectives helped me become a better designer. My biggest learnings from this course is that accessibility is much more than compliance. Before this course, when I thought about accessibility, I mostly thought about things like alternative text, captions, color contracts, and maybe accessibility checklists. Now, I think about accessibility as learners' experience. I think about whether learners can access content, understand content, engage with the content, and demonstrate learning successfully. This course helped me move from asking, can learners access this content, to asking, can learners actually learn from this content in meaningful ways? The empathy challenges were probably the most memorable part of this course. The hearing loss stimulation helped me understand that accessibility is not just about captions. Learners can also miss tone, emotion, emphasis, and context. The color blindness stimulation showed me how much information we often communicate through color alone. The mouth stick activity helped me realize that accessibility is not only about whether something works, but also how comfortable and efficient it is to use. These activities help me see accessibility, help me see accessibility from the learner's perspective rather than from the designer's perspective. One question that kept coming up for me throughout the course was how much accessibility depends on instructional design and how much depends on the platform being used. For example, platforms like Canvas, Moodles, OpenEdX, and Tutor LMS already have many learning and accessibility features built into them. Features such as structured navigation, progress tracking, assessment, and learners' interaction are easier to implement. Google Site is flexible and easy to use, but many accessibility and learning design decisions must be built manually by the designer. This made me wonder whether we should spend time discussing strength and limitation of different platforms when designing accessible learning experience. Another question I continue to think about throughout this course was how to balance accessibility with instructional depth. We often talk about reducing cognitive load, shortening content, and simplifying navigation. Why these are important? Learners also need context, example, demonstration, and detailed explanation. So, shorter content does not always mean better learning. As instructional designer, we often need to explain, demonstrate, provide example, and build understanding. The challenge is finding the right balance between making content easy to navigate and making sure learners receive enough information to learn effectively. This is an area I would have loved to continue exploring. One suggestion I would have is to include more discussion about learning platforms and accessibility. I would also enjoy seeing examples of complete accessible courses built on different platforms. It would be helpful to analyze what works well, what challenges exist, how different designers solve accessibility problem. Another interesting discussion could focus on accessibility trade-offs. For example, how do we balance learner autonomy, content depth, engagement, and accessibility when they sometimes compete with one another? I think this conversation would help students better prepare for real-world instructional work because it's nowadays on Google Sites. Overall, this course will have a direct impact on my professional work as someone who designs learning experience through agronomy, my startup, and workforce development programs. I now think more intentionally about accessibility from the beginning of the design process. I think more carefully about learners' needs, multiple means of engagement, alternative ways of assessing content, and inclusive learning experience. Accessibility is no longer something I consider after a course is built. It is now something I think about during planning, development, and evaluation. My biggest takeaway from this course can be summarized in one question. Before this course, I often ask, can learners access this content? Now I ask, how many different ways can learners access, understand, engage with, and demonstrate learning from this content? Thank you to the instructors and my classmates for creating an engaging learning experience that was practical, reflective, and highly relevant to the work we do as learning designers. This course has given me a stronger foundation for designing learning experience that are both accessible and inclusive. Thank you.